Well, hello everyone. We're going to take a little short tour of classical Indian civilization that will run us from about 1500 BCE to around 300, in which we primarily look at sort of the faith systems, society, and culture of ancient India rather than the imperial systems that emerge in this time. Short overview of some geographic elements. India is bound in the north by the Himalayas and the Kushan, which is modern day Afghanistan. And one thing that we do have to remember is that when we look at the modern political map of India, that is not coterminous with the what we shall call the civilization of ancient India. Ancient India includes the major rivers of the Indus and the Ganges. The Ganges River is still within the boundaries of modern India. However, the Indus River largely flows through Pakistan. And the reason for that political divide really has to do with religious issues that we'll discuss later in the course. The central area of India is dominated by the central south region of India is dominated by the large Deccan Plateau. And while you have sort of that mountainous region in the north, the southernmost areas of India are quite tropical. Monsoons are very, very important to Indian ecology. The farming life in India, as well as sort of the seasonal, cultural, and religious aspects of it, will also be tied to these seasons. The monsoon rains begin in June. They originate from warm tropics coming from East Africa, and they provide it with in the subcontinent with a long growing season, and in some areas about 3 harvests. In the Ganges region, rice growing is possible, and the further north you go, the more wheat, barley, and millet become staple crops. India is accessible to outside invasion. There are mountain passes. The control of those passes are still very much contested today between India and Pakistan. But the typical region through which invasions happened in India were through the mountains of modern day Afghanistan, through the Hindu Kush Mountains. And of course, the direct access to the sea, the very, very long coastline that India enjoys, could be grounds for foreign intervention, but more typically, particularly in pre-modern history, that long coastline tended to give India access to trade with Southeast Asia, Arabia, and East Africa, what we'll talk about later in the course as the Indian Ocean Trade Network. So, let's move along. The Vedic Age. This is very early Indian history, and the reason why it's called Vedic is because it's dominated by the Vedic religious systems that were developed due to the early invasion of a people called the Arya. The Vedic religious system went by the wayside to some extent. Some elements of it, though, were fused into modern Hinduism, so we'll see how that happens. The Arya invasions. Arya are a Indo-European language group speaking people from Central Asia that migrated around 1500 BCE into northwest India. The Arya eventually established control primarily over the northern part of India, and only gradually extended their power into the south. The one thing, though, about the Arya, they were a warrior people that established relatively small kingdoms that did not unify until around 600 or so BCE. But in the year 1000, they established their military authority in the Ganges and Indus River valleys and its fertile farmlands. They supplanted an earlier people called the Dasas, earlier Indian civilization. Sometimes they're called the Dravidians because of the language that they spoke. and that means that the Hindi, the religion, has many dialects, which denotes sort of this sort of earlier clash of cultures and civilizations. The Arya also bring with them a new social order that's typically called the caste system. That's the Portuguese word for it, actually. But the word that's typically used in India is the Varna system. Varna is a term that actually means color, and there, this is we must say, is a racial system. Okay, so the elites in this system tend to be fairer skinned. As you descend the social ladder, skin color is darker, and there's all sorts of nasty things that go along with a system like that. But again, we have to evaluate it for how it operates in Indian society, and to some extent withhold judgment. However, there will be a time when we have to say that, quite honestly, is a system like this an ethical one, as we see it from our own 21st century, largely Western standards. Nevertheless, the social structure of India was divided among four major groups: the Brahmins, who were the priestly caste, the Kshatriyas, who were warriors, the Vaishyas, the merchant and artisan class, and the Shudras, who were peasants and servants. In the earliest days of the Arya invasion, the warrior class would have been considered at the top of the social structure, with the Brahmins, priests, beneath them. And by the way, sorry about the spelling there. Brahmin is Brahmanin. Sorry about that. Only as Arya civilization began to settle down did the priestly order sort of assert its dominance over this social system. Then there were another group of people called the Untouchables. They were not in a Varna, so to speak. They were outside of the system entirely, and that's why they were considered untouchables. They were people who were sort of like resident aliens, we might say, and they would undertake tasks that were not appropriate for anyone who was part of the main line of Indian society. These four castes, or these four varnas that we see here, and what that means in sort of religious terms, we'll see when it comes to reincarnation. Reincarnation is available to members of the four varnas, not the untouchables. They are not part of that system. Within each varna, within each large group of people, priests, warriors, merchants, peasants, and so forth, there are subgroups, and there are hundreds, if not thousands, of these subgroups. And these are really occupations. These have to do with rituals and duties, and so there's all sorts of farmers, there's all sorts of peasants, there's all sorts of artisans in different trades, there's different ranks and warriors, there's different levels of the priesthood, and these are all called the yati. And going along with all this, there are elaborate rules that govern the interaction between these people. So it is a form of, we might call, a type of segregation, but not it's not that Shudras can't interact with artisans, or a peasant can't interact with a priest. They do, but there are certain rituals that govern those interactions. I mentioned this already. Reincarnation is very important in the Vedic tradition. To reincarnate literally means to put back into flesh again. So the belief was that there is everyone has an Atman, a breath, okay, and and that's what animates the flesh, the body. However, there are fixed numbers of Atman. We might say, in Western sense, the word that's best that would be used in the West is called the soul. So when the body dies, the soul then can be put back into another body. And so therefore the soul is, in a sense, the soul is not reborn, but the soul is reborn in another body. Okay? And so the Atman will be reincarnated. And the system was dependent on sacrifice and appropriate sacrifice to ensure that the soul was reborn in either a similar level of Varna or Yati, or a higher one. If you did your duty very well, you would be rewarded in the next life by being reincarnated as something better than what you were in a past life. The Brahmins, the highest social order, this is the reason why they are the sort of the highest level of Indian society, held the key to making sure that the sacrifices were done properly. So if you wanted to ensure that your soul was properly cared for in Indian society, then you would ensure that you did your duty and you followed what the priest says. That's why they were so important in the Varna system. Okay. However, in time, because of this sort of social dominance and control, the Brahmin priests will start to be quite resented, and we'll see that there'll be a number of reactions against their place in society. And this is an image of Varuna, who was a sea god, actually, in the early Vedic pantheon of gods. And he's riding a Makara, which is a sea creature that a lot of the gods ride. Ganga, the goddess of the river Ganges, also is seen riding these. And it typically has like either an elephant or the creature has an elephant head or a crocodile head, which we see here. And in some cases, either a serpent tail or, in this case, a peacock tail. So it's a very fanciful depiction of the Makara.